And with this, over to you, Kai.
Yeah, thank you very much, Larissa, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. I would like to start first with a small legal note, our disclaimer. So the information we are going to share in this session is confidential and proprietary to SAP. It may not be disclosed without permission of SAP. So please keep this in mind. And for further information, please refer to this disclaimer slide. So today's session covers a deeper look at functional advantages of a selective data transition. And I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kai Szatkowski. I'm head of product sales and solutions at Natuvion. And I'd like to hand over to Florens.
Thanks, Kai. Yes, my name is Florens Raschke. I'm from CBS and a senior manager working in the SDT transformation projects. And I'm happy to have someone from SAP with us today.
Thank you, Florens. Hello, everybody. My name is Koustubh Waikar. I head the global customer engagement for DMLT services as part of overall SAP service and delivery organization.
So just as a reminder, a quick look into our engagement community. So this webinar session is brought to you by the Selective Data Transition Partner Community. We are the official expert group of partners to SAP focusing on selective data transitions. We are establishing joint standards here in order to provide flexible and secure transformations from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. And of course, we take a closer look at a high quality transformation at reduced costs. In today's sessions, we would like to cover the following topics. We take a closer look at functional benefits of a selective data transition, and we will also cover techno-functional topics. At the end of the session, of course, you got the opportunity to raise questions. And as Larissa just mentioned, please, whenever you got a question, already start raising it in the Q&A tool so that we can start looking at questions and answer it once we did finish with the slides. Looking at selective data transition, as you're all aware, there are different approaches available going from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. There is a brownfield and there is a greenfield scenario, and then there is a lot of in between. There are selective data transition approaches available in different flavors. Some are more resembling a brownfield approach with some selective portions, and then on the other end, there are greenfield approaches with a lot of selective data loading into the new target system. But of course, this has been covered in detail in a previous session, so please refer to the other webinars as well. When we look at the benefits of a selective data transition approach, then there are basically four major topics that we would like to cover here. One are organizational changes. Then we are taking a look at data harmonization. We also take a look at system consolidations or system splits. And we are also taking a look at a more techno-functional topics at a later stage in the slides. And with this, I would like to hand over to Koustubh covering organizational changes.
Thank you, Kai. Hello, everybody. I would like to first start with this topic of why organization changes are really required in case of a typical business scenario. When we typically look into our current global economy, we see there are trends of slowdown, heavy competition into market, slower or low profit margins, less revenue, which really makes our competitors and businesses to get extremely competitive and at times, decide whether a business is making profit, is it worthy enough to continue to further invest, or we should sell a business. Such events overall coming from an economical situation, political situation or environments, or overall how the business is faring would result into a divestiture for example, or it could also result into an acquisition where companies would buy other companies, and then that would mean there would be acquisition exercise. What we have also seen, a lot of customers also do some restructuring of their businesses to streamline business functions and leverage more synergies compared to geographies, or also it could be based on product lines and segments and so on. These are examples where businesses today need organization changes. It could be resulting from a divestiture or a sale of a company to another organization. It could be restructuring, or it could be a merger or an acquisition. Now, when a company or a business realizes that they need to make a business change, which we typically call as an organizational change, what impact does it really have in an SAP system? When we typically talk about divestitures, it results into carving out of companies. It could be when you're talking about selling companies, so you have to carve out data for that company. It not always is required that you would carve out a complete company altogether. There could be an asset deal or a sale deal, which would result into sometimes a logical separation of companies and physical separation of companies. So these are some scenarios which typically result from divestitures, when a result of a divestiture could result into setting up new company codes and then handing over complete data for those company codes to the potential buyer or somebody who's acquiring, the business that is being sold. So this typically results into a logical separation and physical separation. When we talk about logical separation here, the idea is depending on what is being sold by a seller to a buyer, there is a need to set up a complete company. It could be there are some plants, storage locations, some product lines which are sold. A separate company needs to be established, where all of these elements are logically created in one company, and then they are handed over to the potential buyer. This is what we call as a logical separation. Sometimes it's a preparation step. Physical separation would be there are complete companies represented in SAP as company codes, which are sold completely to the buyer, and then the entire data for these company codes, which would be configuration, master data, transaction data, meaning historical transaction and open transactions, all of this is carved out from your existing system and then handed over to a buyer. So this is one example where a result of a divestiture would be basically a logical or a physical separation. The other aspect of organizational change is restructuring. When we talk about restructuring, this is really splitting entities or merging entities to prepare or to streamline your business with your geographical or product lines. This could result into, again, setting up new company codes, sometimes moving plants from one company code to another, setting up new plants. Sometimes it would also result into merging profit centers, cost centers, etc., to have a more streamlined and unified reporting. So these are some examples of a result of a business need of restructuring into an SAP system. And finally, talking about mergers and acquisitions, whenever a company or a buyer acquires another company, there is always a need to integrate the data that is coming from this acquired entity into the buyer's original SAP system, which would result into either setting up of new company codes or bringing data from the seller entity into existing company codes. Depending on how these company codes are different, there could be this could result into merging company codes, merging controlling areas, consolidating purchase organizations, sales organizations. So these are some examples where a consequence of a merger and acquisition would result into an organization change in an SAP system. Now, what do we have in terms of benefits of selective data transition? As Kai mentioned in the previous slide, it's more of a transition from ECC to S/4HANA. One of a major functional advantage of leveraging selective data transition is you can combine the realization of organizational changes together with the transition from ECC to S/4HANA in one step. So you do not really have to really look at your business event of a merger, acquisition, or divestiture as a separate exercise and transition to S/4HANA as a separate exercise, but you can combine these business transformations together with your move from ECC to S/4HANA with a selective data transition scenario. So this is what we would like to cover overall in terms of functional benefits of selective data transition, focusing on organization changes. I would like to hand it over to my colleague Florens, who would give a further deep dive into data harmonization topics.
Thanks a lot. And yes, what we also see at many customers is the topic of data harmonization. And not only based on the things Koustubh just explained, but we also see the harmonization of customizing, which is needed. You want to align processes, you want to align customizing, and then the deduplication of master data is really a pain point for many customers we see in the market, and they want to use this project to get a better data quality and to have one customer and not 4 or 5 customers, which is the same customer. So this is really a main topic for many customers, to reduce this and then also to simplify the data, to have one chart of account, to get rid of old stuff. So really to harmonize your master data is a main driver in the scenario of a transition to S4. Why do we see its point, right? Why is it an advantage for the SDT approach? Whenever you want to reduce your duplicates in a system, or you want to simplify your data in an ERP system, this is always an impact on your entire system. So you need to adjust not only the master data, you also need to adjust your transactional data, the historical data, and so it's a big project. Yeah? So from the technical part, it's not so big, but from the effect, you have to do the testing, you have to do the interfaces, you have to think about the business downtime, and these steps all are done in any S4 transition. So if we combine this within the SDT approach, we reduce in total the effort of testing, the effort of interface adjustments, and we can combine it. And we really see many benefits for the customers when deduplication the master data, and also harmonizing, customizing, and other master data. Why do we do it in one? I just said it a little bit. So we reduce the downtime in total, because we don't need an additional project where we need, again, a separate downtime. We don't need to find a window. And if you can imagine, if you have a big system and you need to change all your data, it's always with some time effect. So within the SDT, we have the one downtime for the S4 move and the data harmonization. And getting more and more important is the data quality, especially for the part of deduplication. The data quality is very important for the future, not only for the reporting. You know really what your customer is buying, or your vendor, what do you purchase at your vendor, because you really have the golden record of your master. And it's the same for the chart of account. One global chart of account is helping you in the reporting. And it's a buzzword at the moment, but you need, for any AI initiative, good data. And deduplicated data is one very important step to go in any AI initiative. And at the end, one last thing for the topic of costs. If you have better and harmonized data, the process costs are reduced, and we really see the benefits At our customers, we already did, all of us did project with this data harmonization, and then also the helpful and the reduced process costs in the S4 system. And here now one step is missing here, where data harmonization is very important. And why is it missing? Because Kai will go on this step now a little bit more in detail. What is with the harmonization of old systems?
Yeah, thanks, Florens. Actually, this is yet another benefit of going for a selective data transition, because at the same time we can, for example, consolidate large system landscapes into a smaller amount of systems. When you think about your company, you might have been in the market for many, many years, actually, most of you probably for decades. So you kept buying companies, you implemented new systems over the time. And if you now check your landscape, you probably find a lot of systems doing similar tasks, doing similar processes. So many customers are looking to consolidate this amount of systems into a smaller number. And of course, going for the selective data transition in this regard means that only the relevant data will be taken out of the corresponding source systems and merged into, for example, one single target system. This, of course, helps to reduce total cost of IT operation in this regard, and also optimizes the IT operation, because the less systems you need to maintain, the less cost and the less effort you have in IT operations. But also the other way around is something which we see quite often when you think about an ECC system, which covers ERP functionality and also, for example, HCM functionality. Many customers are looking to separate these two crucial business functionalities into separate systems. This is one typical example. Another example would be to better represent a regional separation between systems, especially when you think about legal requirements of where physically data is stored. Then sometimes you need to have separate systems around the globe. Both scenarios are possible with the selective data transition approach, that you are not only going to S/4HANA, but at the same time you take the opportunity to optimize your IT operation and to lower your IT operating costs. Since we are already a little bit more in the technical aspect of selective data transition, we now have a couple of more functionalities that are more techno-functional, if you like. And many of them are usually conducted in pre-projects, but with the selective data transition approach, you can avoid these pre-projects, but instead combine it into one slightly bigger IT project. And one good example is the customer vendor integration, which can be done during the selective data transition. But there are other aspects as well. Florens?
Yes, next to one of the main topics is always the business partner, so this customer vendor integration, of course, and quite a lot of customers do the pre-project and for this topic, and you don't have to do it with the SDT, and the same is for the new general ledger and the new asset accounting. We see a lot of customers do it in the ERP system or in the ECC system in front of S4's transition, but with SDT you can do it at one step. So you can, from the old ledger, move to the new general ledger and the new asset accounting in one project. You don't have to do it in different steps. Koustubh, you wanted to add some other topics?
Yeah, on the fly, new GL migration, I think this is definitely one of an important topic. I would like to emphasize on this. We still have a lot of customers who are on classic GL, which is, you know, the old version of having a single ledger for accounting. Typically, when these customers go for a transition to S/4HANA or doing a system conversion approach, typically they are required to go for what we call as a parallel account approach, but the parallel ledger or the having multiple ledgers option is not possible. Such cases need a new GL migration scenario upfront in ECC, where you have to run a pre-project where you do a new GL migration. So you have leading and non-leading ledgers in ECC. And once this is done, then you could leverage the parallel ledger approach on S/4HANA in finance. One major benefit of using selective data transition as a scenario is you do not need to do a pre-project of new GL migration, but this can be done while the data gets migrated from ECC to S/4HANA. So the implementation of new general migration, including migration of historical data into the leading, non-leading ledger, need not be done as a pre-project, but this could be done while the data gets migrated to S/4HANA. Again, implementation of new asset accounting is another important aspect. Another case which we sometimes face, this is not a encounter, not very common, is there are some old systems. We still have customers with old systems, and a lot of these old systems are required now, obviously, with the end of maintenance from ECC, end of 2027, which is just on the line coming the next 3 years. We still have some customers on older release, and these releases sometimes have non-Unicode environments. When we talk about non-Unicode, it's pretty much the characters or this data character set that is available is not Unicode. And if there are multiple languages set up like Chinese, Japanese, Russians, and all of this data is represented in a non-Unicode environment, then typically for system conversion scenarios, there is another pre-project required to do a Unicode conversion of the data as a prerequisite before migrating to S/4HANA. So there are some scenarios of selective data transition where Unicode conversion can be done on the fly. Obviously, there are some checks that are required to be implemented, like whether the system is having a single code page on the database level. In those cases, a pre-project can be completely avoided and data can be migrated from your ECC system by bypassing a Unicode conversion. The data migration aspect does take care of doing this while the data gets migrated. So those are a couple of important aspects. I think another topic would be very important would be on the downtime reduction aspect. So would you like to talk about?
So the whole topic of reducing the downtime window to whatever is acceptable according to your business requirements is something which we also address during the selective data transition. So with the selective approach, there are different opportunities to reduce the total amount of data which needs to be transferred and transformed during the actual go-live window. There are, of course, different technical possibilities to achieve this, but this, of course, depends on your individual system setting and the total size of your system. But as a result, it is possible to reduce the technical downtime usually down to a few hours, allowing you to continue with the business processes as quick as possible, so that the impact on your business is minimized. At the same time, there's also a business function unswitch possible. As we just covered earlier, there might be business functions in a system existing that you are now looking to move to a separate system, or there might be some functionality which you don't longer use in your system, and in order to get rid of the relevant customizing and the data from that business function is something which can be done during the selective data transition as well. And last but not least, there is, of course, the opportunity to have an EWM implementation during a selective data transition, but this will be covered in detail in a separate session, so watch out for this one. So I think from the topics, we already came to an end. It's a very comprehensive settings that we have here. There are a lot of opportunities to optimize your IT operations and to reduce your total operating costs. And I think we already got a couple of questions. Let's take a look into the questions.
Yes, we have one that we should share some more experience with our customers on SDT projects for the benefits of harmonization, of data harmonization. So I already talked a little bit about it. What was your experience on data harmonization?
Maybe I can take a specific example of a utility customer. So what we have seen typically with utility customers is there are a lot of duplicate customers and business partners, and this could also happen in a real life scenario, where we have, at least in my case, I can definitely tell I keep on moving houses and I have different contracts eventually with the same utility provider, which would result into different addresses with me as the same user. A lot of times new contracts are created, so a new customer account is created in a system. So similar to me, there are many customers, or there are many examples where there is a lot of duplicate customer data that is eventually created in customer SAP system, which would also result into a lot of duplicate addresses available. A lot of these addresses would eventually point to the same address. Now, what happens is, as part of transition from ECC to S/4HANA, there is a requirement of creation of business partners, because the old world of customers and vendors or objects are no longer directly transacting in S/4HANA, but it is more business partner with customer as a role, or vendor as a role is what is being used. So there is an exercise of creation of business partners for customers and vendors. Now, if you really have a lot of duplicate customers and business partners, then there is always a need to create a business partner. And if you're not really cleaning or consolidating this data, then you end up as a customer having a lot of business partners, which means you really have still a lot of duplicate data now available in the form of business partner. So this was one really concrete need where there was a need to consolidate, identify duplicate customers and vendors, merge them together, and then create unique business partners. Now, when we talk about such an example, one of the challenges that we face in an SDT scenario is, with SDT, we are migrating data at table level. So we are not creating new business partners for future uses, like in the case of a new implementation, where you would create a new customer or a new business partner, and they will start transacting in future. Here we are talking about migrating historical data, which means this merged or consolidated business partner also needs to be reflected in configuration data, in account groups, in transaction history, at places where there is a sales order or information about readings and so on. So the data harmonization is not only required at master data, it is required to be done in configuration, open transactions, and historical transactions as well. So these are some unique challenges which are faced while cleansing the data in SDT scenarios, which have to be appropriately addressed while moving the data. So it could also be called as a benefit, where data is not only identified and cleaned, but it is also cleaned across the history while the data gets migrated from ECC to S4.
Yeah. I can underline your sentence totally. I just want to add something, because it was also asked for what challenges do we face, and of course we don't have only the deduplication of master data, we also have the topics of harmonization, of customizing, and of course there we face, or the customer face issue, what is the right way to go, because changing, customizing, and with the focus clean core, it's also for customizing a topic to identify what is the right way to harmonize the data. There we see definitely discussions at the customers to find the right way. But from the transition, then it's not a challenge anymore. So with the SDT, we don't have the transition challenge, but of course there are discussions within the customer what is the right way to go. And I want yet another question going to the same topic. when we have consolidated paired business partner data, how do we achieve the data quality or hygiene? I think it were about 3 or 4 projects with an SDT, where at the same time there was an SAP MDG introduced. Yeah, because with the SDT, we can also support bringing in an MDG, and yeah, you are all nodding. So this is not only for me an experience. So with MDG, of course, you can really then much more easy keep your data clean. And so, yeah, this is at many customers a way to go to keep the then cleansed data clean for the future.
Right. It's probably worth noting that when you take the effort in rectifying data quality issues during the selective data transition, then you are, of course, investing some kind of time and money in testing exercise. And why not safeguarding this investment for the future by introducing proper master data management?
Absolutely. And I think this is really a very important aspect when you're cleaning historical data. I mean, when you're talking about moving data and cleaning it while the data gets moved, this will take care of cleaning up what was, created as duplicates in the past. But this doesn't ensure or enforce that it will remain clean in the future. So this was definitely a very valid question. How do we really ensure once the data is clean, it remains clean? And this is where establishing master data governance processes, I mean, it could use the tool, but besides using tools, I think establishing a real master data governance process from a business user standpoint, this is really important. Otherwise, this exercise would be required to be repeated again and again in future. So for customers, it's really important to take this as an opportunity to identify duplicates, clean it, leveraging our SDT technology, but at the same time, it is really important to define practices and governance to ensure that this is stopped right away, and then they have a clean data going forward.
Right. Let me step in for the Q&A part. We had already several questions answered, and there are some coming in. Maybe before we move to the open questions, maybe you can give a short summary what was raised so far, because usually when you answer in the Q&A tool, it's only visible for one person, but maybe just a short summary, what were the main aspects that were raised so far, and then we move to the questions that are still open.
The main questions at the moment were, will this episode be uploaded and the files, the PowerPoint presentation will be shared? Yes, it will, to make it short. So at the end of the week, also this webinar will be shared on the in the internet. And there was one other question which was not discussed here in the live round, is if we can also merge non-SAP ERP systems into S4 as a target. And yes, this is also possible. Of course, with non-SAP source systems, you have to take some other topics into account, then from SAP ECC to SAP S4, but in general, with this technology, we can also include non-SAP systems into an S4 system. And I
think there was also a question about the time or the typical project time for a selective data transition. I think we can comment on that as well, because this is really a common question. Compared, for example, to a brownfield approach. A brownfield approach is really limited in terms of what you are doing during a conversion. It is purely the pure technical conversions that we are doing here. So this is usually a project in the range of about 6 months. But when we are thinking about a selective data transition, as we just laid out, there are a bit more tasks that we are covering, and we, depending on the scope of all the additional topics that we're covering, it could be anything between 9 to 18 months project time.
One important just to add here is system conversions, although appear to be technically driven projects, may not always be short in terms of the timelines, because typically with system conversion projects, the entire data set in an ECC system gets converted into S/4HANA, and there are significant checks in the system, while the data gets converted through the SUM tool into S/4HANA. And if there are errors, like material documents not having references to materials, if they are archived or extensions have been no longer valid, or center assignments have changed, GL accounts are no longer open item and balance where they were when the line items happened. And a lot of these, these are some examples where we have seen there are a lot of errors while the system conversion happens. And the time required by business users and data, the IT team to analyze and resolve these issues would eventually result into longer durations of time. Also could be to a 1 year or longer projects for system conversion, because there is a need to ensure everything that gets converted is consistent in the system. So those are some cases where there are benefits with selective data transition. You only need to look at the data that is required to be migrated to be consistent and corrected in the format. So a lot of times the system conversion could also result into a year or a longer project. Selective data transition, obviously, depending on the complexity, as Kai mentioned, could be 9 months to 18 months. So these are, low to high complexity average durations that you see. Anything that you would like to add?
No, it's also my experience. 6 months, quite seldom the conversions I saw on the market. So quite often the conversions take, as you just said, easily 12 months due to all the cleansing activities. So yeah, it's the same experience, but you see it. Yeah, I never saw an SDT in 6 months. We can see a 6 months conversion, that's possible, but in general, I would say 9 to 12 months in the conversion is quite common, and 9 to 18 in an SDT, depending on what functional topics you want to add, is standard timeline, I would also say.
I think
All
there's
right.
another question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the next one. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's another question. If you are bringing historical or closed transactions into new financial structures and configuration, how does historical data fit into new structure? Is there audit concerns about restructuring of historical data? So shall I take a first stab, and maybe feel free to, or you want to look at that? So one of the things I could call out is, let's take an example of, it's easier to take concrete examples when we talk about harmonization of financial structures. One very common example that we have seen is harmonizing or consolidating GL accounts as part of chart of account conversions. This is a very common example where we see our customers saying, okay, we have a lot of GL accounts and they would need to harmonize. When we talk about harmonizing, it's like really consolidating GL accounts. We call it chart of account harmonization or consolidation exercise. So when we talk about, we have financial documents which are really assigned to different GL accounts, and now we are trying to harmonize. If we really have a scenario where we are renumbering or consolidating, which is like merging chart of accounts while the data gets migrated, then yes, there is definitely a possibility that this gets merged and then transformed into new S/4HANA. I think all the tools that we're talking about do have a possibility to track and maintain the information of how the mapping of this data is actually done in terms of what are old GL accounts in this example getting consolidated to the new GL account and references where this is being done. So there is a level of audit trail that is provided by the tools while the data gets migrated, so that this information can be shared with the auditor and this becomes completely transparent. Other examples are consolidating company codes while the data gets migrated. This becomes a little more complex because then company codes have number ranges for documents, and then the number ranges for financial documents, for example, also needs to be harmonized because each company code would have for a fiscal year number saying 1, 2, 3, 4 for year 2022-23. The consolidating company codes, then all these company codes would have finance documents with the same number. In this case, there is an exercise called renumbering of documents that is required, where dedicated number ranges are assigned to historical documents. Again, this information is transparent because the number ranges are discussed with business users on what should be the number range for this company code versus that company codes. Sometimes they also like to mention some specific number range or some specific prefix so that they could identify that this historically this document came from an older company code. So there are different mechanisms through which it is easier for the business user to find out, looking at the document number itself, what was the source, or sometimes this information is clearly documented as part of an audit log about how the renumbering was done. So these are some couple of examples on how the enterprise or the organizational change on finance structure ensures historical data is preserved and is available for audit trail. Florence, you want to?
Yeah, I think we promised to talk a little bit out of our project experience, right? So I think the main topic is that you talk to your auditors as soon as possible about the whole project, yeah? And with our SDT approach, we deliver the documents and the documentation the auditor needs, but it needs some time to get it into the boat, yeah? So if you talk in the first integration test the first time with it, with the auditor, with your company doing the audits, then it's really a smooth way to the go live, yeah, because they understand our approach, they understand our documentations, and they have of course some requirements, but we can deliver them. And with bringing them into the project as soon as possible, I have no issues with auditors anymore at all SDT projects, yeah. So they understand what we are doing, they understand our documentation, and then they are happy, yeah. And with all restructuring, with all new values on some accounts and things like this, that's done all fine, yeah, because mapping is documented, and we have the results and also documented, and then they are happy with us.
Absolutely.
Here are some other questions in the line. So one is, are you using standard or proprietary tools for data cleanup? I would say it depends a little bit on what kind of data cleanup is meant here. All of us offer software to identify golden records, so for the deduplication, which is one of the main data harmonization and master data area, yeah, so to reduce the duplicates of mass materials, customer vendors, and things like this. So therefore, we all of us offer at the end tools to solve this issue. For cleaning up, yeah, what I would need some more examples to really talk about. Yeah, we are not changing your addresses during an SDT migration. So yeah, so there's no postal code checks which we include in this project. Yeah, but for identifying duplicates, yes. And another one is as we are nearing 2027 for ECC, can we do brownfield and then do a data system consolidation later due to SDT timelines? Of course, it is possible to do now a conversion to S4 and then using the selective approaches and the advantages of a selective approach from an S4 to an S4 system. But nevertheless, of course, you have again then two projects. So one big advantage is lost, but yes, our processes we define here, our safeguards, rules we have in our engagement community here will also be make it possible to migrate from S4 to S4 and to do then the selective approach. And also, this is not a question here, but based on this, for companies who already went to an S4 on-premise and they want to go to RISE, the SDT is again an option to reduce data volume and to be then, and again, perhaps do the next step of harmonization from the on-premise to the RISE to be then, yeah, more cleaned up system in the RISE world, which of course support then reduces costs and things like this. I hope this answers your question.
One thing also to call out is all SDT community partners have been doing this SDT projects over the last 5 plus 6, 7 years, and all of us have built accelerators to reduce the time and add more software-based capabilities to transition to S/4HANA. So yes, I mean, there is always a choice. You do a brownfield conversion first and then do consolidations later. But then it is pretty much, like you're sometimes pushing the problem to a later point in time and just meeting the timeline. Obviously, you have to look at the total holistic cost of doing that transition first, and then another project for doing the consolidation later. Timeline can be evaluated. It's still 3 years to go. I think this is definitely a possibility to see what are your complexities, how many go lives are you looking at, and really make a conscious decision whether system conversion first and doing consolidation later meets your business needs and investment requirements overall, or would you like to combine these things together? I think we have seen a lot of customers who are still evaluating and starting and leveraging SDT to do business transformations now and maximizing their investments to transition to S/4HANA. So this has been a trend that we have seen with our customers. But again, it really depends on your investment required needs and your transformation and your time to transition to S/4 in general.
Are there any other questions?
Right. So now is the moment to catch up with our experts. I
There's
see
another one.
2 more questions just
Yes.
arrived. So
The
go
first
ahead.
one is quite easy to answer. SDT supports both, so a wave or phased release or Big Bang. It depends on, in most cases, on the customer situation. Can the customer support a Big Bang over the whole world, for example? So your own organization needs to be capable to do a Big Bang. And so yeah, from SDT approach, all of the SDT community members can support a phased release or a Big Bang. And this really customer specific. I can't even tell you what is the better way. It really depends on your situation, on your processes, on your system setup.
All right. Thanks for that. I think there is one more question in the chat, and I think Koustubh is answering it. But this one is more philosophical one.
Yes, yes, and I think this is actually really something that we all of us have really seen. When there is a limited tenure, we've seen a lot of this in banking and insurance sectors, where the term of CIOs is typically limited, and depending on how the bank or the finance company or the insurance company operates, may or may not be the CIO in the next 3 or 5 years going forward. So there is always a risk of being tendency of being risk averse and going for something which is safer rather than considered perceived as risky. And one important thing to call out here is SDT as a scenario obviously has been in the market for the last 15 plus years. There have been transitions from 4.6C R3 Enterprise to ECC, from ECC5 to ECC6, and now from ECC6 to S/4HANA. So S/4HANA definitely is a different product line compared to ECC or what you've seen in the past. But this transition approach of moving from an old version of SAP system to a new version with transformation is not new. This has been tried and tested for a very long time, and all the partners in the community have significant experience of leveraging and doing system as selective data transition projects successfully. So it is wise and safe to say that this is not a risky approach. It is a pretty safe approach and tried and tested approach to do things. I think the main argumentation should be the business outcome that you're looking at versus the investment you're spending on transition to S4. These would be the main decision factors to look at, or questions to look at, compared to a plain transition versus SDT.
All right, thank you for that. So, do we have more questions? We are almost at the end of the time on top of the hour. So now is the last chance for take the question. Again, let me already thank you, our speakers. Thank you, Koustubh, Kai, and Florens for being our speakers today, also bringing up all these specific aspects, for being so active, also answering all the questions. And of course, I can only thank you, our audience, for being with us. And yeah, please stay tuned. Next week, we will have another session on SDT. I think this will cover, I think then the next week's session will cover the technical aspects. So, and I will be sending the reminder to those who are subscribed on for our Move to Cloud ERP webcast. So also the reminder includes an invite. So make sure you join us next week. The session will be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. CET time, and the recording and the PDF will be available. Again, we will upload the materials on the YouTube playlist that I've already posted in the chat. So please leverage also, if you can't join live, please leverage the opportunity to, yes, to make aware of our assets via YouTube playlist, and also consume the information that will be available there. So with this, I can't see more questions in the chat. I think we are done for today. Again, thank you very much. And with this, let me stop the recording.